There are moments in international conflict where a single geographic point becomes far more than a location on a map. It becomes a pressure valve for the global economy, a symbol of strategic power, and at times a potential trigger for wider escalation. Tonight, that point is the Strait of Hormuz. In an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered one of the clearest signals yet about Washington's position in the aftermath of escalating tensions with Iran. His message was direct, deliberate, and difficult to misinterpret. The United States, he said, will not accept any attempt by Iran to control or block the Strait of Hormuz, and it will reopen, in his words, one way or another. That phrase, simple on its surface, carries significant geopolitical weight because the Strait of Hormuz is not just another maritime passage. It is one of the most critical energy choke points in the world, a narrow corridor through which a substantial portion of global oil supply flows every single day. Any disruption there is not regional, it is global. And now it is at the center of an increasingly tense standoff. According to Rubio, Iran's position regarding the strait is unacceptable to the United States. While he did not outline specific operational steps, he made it clear that Washington views the free flow of navigation through the waterway as non-negotiable. He also issued a warning, again carefully worded but unmistakable in tone, that Iran would face what he described as real consequences if it continues efforts to block or restrict access to the strait. That warning comes amid an already volatile backdrop. The region has been on edge following a series of military developments and exchanges that have raised concerns about a broader confrontation. While details on the ground continue to evolve, what is clear is that the Strait of Hormuz has once again become a focal point, not just of military strategy, but of economic stability. From Iran's perspective, control over the strait has long been framed as a matter of national security and leverage. Iranian officials have, in past moments of tension, suggested that they could restrict access in response to external pressure or military actions. Those statements have historically been part of a broader strategy of deterrence. But from Washington's standpoint, that position crosses a red line. The United States, along with its allies, has consistently maintained that the Strait of Hormuz is an narchiatic waterway, where freedom of navigation must be preserved under international law. Any attempt to block it is viewed not just as a regional move, but as a direct challenge to global commerce. And this is where Rubio's comments take on additional significance, because he is not simply restating a long-standing U.S. policy. He is doing so at a moment when tensions are already elevated, and doing so in language that suggests a readiness to act if necessary. Still, it is important to distinguish between stated policy and immediate action. Rubio did not announce a specific military plan. He did not detail timelines, deployments, or coordinated operations. What he did provide was a clear articulation of intent, an indication of how the United States views the situation and what it is prepared to defend. And in geopolitics, that kind of signaling matters. It sends a message not only to Iran, but also to regional partners, global markets, and other international actors who are closely watching developments. It reinforces the idea that the Strait of Hormuz remains a critical interest for the United States, and that any disruption there would not go unanswered. At the same time, the language used one way or another leaves room for multiple interpretations. It could imply diplomatic pressure, economic measures, or, if tensions continue to escalate, the possibility of military involvement. Historically, the United States has maintained a strong naval presence in the region precisely to ensure open shipping lanes. That presence has often served as both a deterrent and a reassurance to allies. But moments like this test those dynamics because they raise the question of what happens if deterrence fails, or if competing red lines begin to overlap. For Iran, the calculus is complex. Any move to block the strait carries significant risks, including potential international isolation and direct confrontation with a coalition of states that rely on the waterway for energy transport. At the same time, signaling the ability to disrupt that flow can be seen as a way to exert pressure and demonstrate strategic reach for the United States. The challenge is equally nuanced. It must balance the need to uphold international norms and protect economic stability with the risks of escalation in an already volatile region. Any action taken in response to a blockade, real or perceived, would have immediate and far-reaching consequences. And beyond the immediate actors, the global implications are substantial. Energy markets are particularly sensitive to developments in the Strait of Hormuz. Even the perception of risk can lead to price volatility, supply concerns, and broader economic ripple effects. Countries far removed from the region would feel the impact through fuel costs, inflation pressures, and shifts in trade dynamics. This is why statements like Rubio's resonate far beyond the interview in which they are delivered. They become part of a larger narrative, one that shapes expectations, influences decision-making, and in some cases alters the course of events. It is also worth noting the platform through which these comments were made. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Rubio was addressing not only a global audience but also a regional one. The message was directed, in part, at audiences in the Middle East, where perceptions of U.S. policy and intentions carry significant weight. And in that context, clarity matters. The clarity of saying that the strait will reopen, the clarity of rejecting Iran's claim,
the clarity of warning of consequences, but clarity in geopolitics does not always translate into certainty because the situation on the ground remains fluid. Developments can shift rapidly, statements can be interpreted in different ways by different actors, and the line between deterrence and escalation can become increasingly difficult to maintain. What we are seeing now is a moment of strategic signaling, a moment where words are being used to define boundaries, to communicate resolve, and to shape the decisions of others. Whether those words will be enough to prevent further escalation, or whether they are a prelude to more direct action, remains to be seen. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains open. But it is also, once again, at the center of a geopolitical equation that involves military capability, economic necessity, and competing visions of control and access. And as long as that equation remains unresolved, the world will continue to watch, closely, carefully, and with an understanding that what happens in that narrow stretch of water can have consequences far beyond its shores. Because in moments like this, geography becomes destiny, and the Strait of Hormuz becomes not just a passageway, but a test of how far nations are willing to go to defend what they see as essential. And tonight, that test appears to be entering a new phase,